Welcome back to DeFi Football on YouTube. This week we're doing a bit of a special episode. It's not a normal interview or anything like that. We're doing a Halifax special, if you like. We're going to be speaking to Lewis Walsh, who I think a lot of the Halifax fans will be familiar with from Twitter. We're going to be going over Pete Wild's time at Halifax since he joined last year, going through it, asking Lewis some questions about his time at the club and, the good bits, the bad bits, and, having a look at the future with Pete Wild, obviously. Just a bit of a general overview. He joined in the summer last year, got him to the playoffs, and has had, perhaps we might say, a little bit of a slow start compared to how he started last season. It's fair to say. All like I said, they've had a bit of an okay run recently, 3 wins in the bounce, I think, before defeat the other week. So you could say a bit of a change. How are you doing, Lewis?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Are you?
I'm good as well. Thanks for taking time out and having a chat. I was know uni's dead busy and you're always doing lots of work. Pete Wild then. Now, for obviously, I think a lot of the fans watching this will be Halifax fans, so they'll know who he is already. But for anyone who isn't a Halifax fan or isn't too familiar with Pete Wild and Halifax, what sort of general overview, a quick sort of summary of his time at the club.
Yeah, so you've kind of got it there yourself, really. He came into the club with about 10 days to go before the start of last season after Jamie Fulton resigned. He came in with the expectations being probably... the expectations were probably really low at the time after the pre-season we'd had. We ended up absolutely smashing everyone's expectations, really, by reaching the playoffs last season. So I think the general view is that we're quite optimistic of Pete Wild at Halifax. I think he's quite well liked, really. So I hope that kind of does your question justice.
So you touched on it then, but the way he came in was a bit strange from normal. Obviously, Jamie Fulton left. You got a caretaker manager for, I think, a little bit before the season had started, or while you're in the middle of pre-season friendlies. Wild comes in 10 games to go, 10 days before the season starts, sorry. So you must be, you'd probably look at that on paper and go, relegation, but down in the bottom with how crazy things are going on. That's not how it started, did it?
No, you're kind of right about our pre-season. It was just probably the worst pre-season you could hope for, really. Our first friend had to be cancelled because we didn't have enough players. The pitch was looking like it might not be ready in time for the season. Obviously it was, but we were having to play all of our friendlies away from home at the time. We were having problems in terms of recruitment, and Fulton resigns. Nathan Clark, who is our captain, had to step in to be caretaker manager at the time. We did all right under him. We drew 2-2 with Doncaster, and we seemed like we were going all right. Then Wild comes in. I think the reaction at the time was a bit mixed, I suppose, because I think there was a bit of a consensus amongst Halifax fans at the time that they might have wanted Nathan Clark to get the job. So the reaction with Wild coming in was maybe mixed because of that. But I think once we'd read what Oldham fans had to say about him, kind of remembered what he did, obviously, with the FA Cup win against Fulham. We started to get a little bit more excited about him. He was saying all the right things. He seemed like a good young manager. So things were seeming a bit more positive. And then we had a friendly away at Oldham. I think it might have been like a day or two after he came in.
I think it was his first game, wasn't it?
Yeah, the friendly was his first game. It might have been just almost right after he came in, which led to people thinking, they've had this in the works for a while. But I don't think it was like that. But yeah, he came in. We played and beat Oldham almost immediately, which I think got a lot of people a lot more excited for the season.
Yeah, so in general, you talked about pre-season there and beating Oldham. What was the general start of the season like? And what were the Halifax fans like after that, seeing those results? I guess they might have been a bit shocked.
Yeah, so we had a brilliant start to the season. Away at Ebbsfleet, we won 4-1, I think it was, including a goal from Nathan Clark where he chips the Ebbsfleet keeper from about 60 yards out. The results after that were really good to the point where we're thinking that we could maybe do some. We might not be the relegation favourites that season. But I think at the same time, though, because for the past couple of seasons, Halifax have always had kind of a bit of a theme of starting like a house on fire, but then just dropping off after September. So there was maybe kind of that sort of worry. And we did kind of drop off for a little bit after that, after an amazing start to the season. It just happened a bit later than usual because usually the drop off starts as soon as we enter September, but the drop off started in October that year. But yeah, the start to the season was definitely a lot better than anyone could have hoped for, really.
As you spoke about October there, up and around at October, you up near the top of the table, and every team has it where sort of a good team will start and they'll be near the top, like I said, for maybe for 6 or 7 games, then drop off completely. But you're still up there by October, so you must be sort of thinking, all right, lads, something's going to happen here. We're gonna see Halifax do something.
Yeah, but again, as I touched on there, we just kind of had that drop off after where we were just thinking, oh, here we go. We'll just kind of find our natural place in the league. We'll probably mellow off into mid-table, and that kind of happened. That kind of kept happening for a while. That drop off, where we just kind of had a very poor run of fixtures up until, and I think it all culminated on Boxing Day when we lost 5-1 away at Stockport, which was just a horrendous performance. Then I suppose things started to pick up after then. We had a change of system to the sort of 3-4-1-2 that we still use to this day, and results picked up after that. I think part of it also culminated in us bringing Devante Rodney back in on loan in that January. So yeah, we had that little bit of a drop off, but then I suppose around the new year we had a little bit of a good turning fortune again after that.
You spoke about the new year. I've got the numbers up here. So you started the year off with draw with Stockport, draw with Barnet, and then a nice little run here, beating Torquay 2-1, Maidenhead 5-2, Charlie 1-0, Dover 4-2, and Bromley 2-1. So that's a nice little run. 15 points is going to get you, 5 wins from 5 is going to boost you up the table, and that did, boost you back up the table. So as a fan, you must have been sat there thinking, all right, then maybe it's back on.
Yeah, I remember for a little bit during that sort of when we were thinking, okay, the playoffs should be happening at this point. I think a few more optimistic town fans were thinking, hang on, Barrow are having a little bit of a drop off here. We might be able to go for the league. Obviously, that didn't happen because we had another little bit of a drop off after that. But that sort of run just sort of kind of restored faith in the season, made us think, hang on, this is a bit different to other seasons now. We are still capable of something. So I certainly think that sort of little run kind of saved our season, yeah.
That little run, and then you lost a few games, and then the whole season gets called off. So, and then, things frozen. Being honest with the, amount of games you had left, it might, was it about 10 games or roughly, generally in that league, it would have been about 10 games, I think it would have been, everyone had to play. What do you think would have happened had the season finished as normal?
Well, I think almost every Halifax fan would agree with what I'm about to say, in that we would not have made the playoffs had the season been played to a finish. We were just on too poor of a run to kind of finish in the playoffs, in my opinion. It wasn't even just the results. We just kind of went back into our shells a little bit. Like Devante Rodney was almost having to play 5 different positions in a game because he was just having to do everything for him. Everyone was just playing that badly. So yeah, I think the season being curtailed when it was did us a massive favour in the end.
So before we move on to sort of the playoffs thing, looking back at the whole season, main season proper in general, what would you say would be one of the positives in that season?
Oh, the positives. Not having a September drop off. Rodney returning was a massive highlight of the season. He had been at Stockport on loan for a little bit, and we were just thinking, after that, we're thinking, yeah, that's the end of the relationship between us and him. But then he did come back, which kind of, again, as I've alluded to, kind of was the reason we had the upturning fortunes around the new year.
Asked about the highlight of that season, what would then be the low light, the worst part of that season, then, would you say?
So one of the big lowlights from that season was losing 5-1 to Stockport on Boxing Day. I think that just kind of culminated in a bit of a feeling amongst some town fans that Pete Wild maybe wasn't the man for the job, but obviously we turned things around. And again, as I've alluded to that before, part of that turnaround was going to the 3-4-1-2, and it kind of revitalised our season. And another thing is that it kind of revitalised Jeff King, who I know you've had on your podcast before, career with us. He was like, okay, before that, he was okay. He wasn't anything special, but since being moved from a winger who'd come on with maybe 25 minutes to go, he's probably become one of the best players at the club since being moved to right wing back. I suppose another big low light for the season, though, would be going out of the FA Trophy to Halesoe in town. You know, a cup upset, being on the wrong end of a cup upset is bad enough, but when it happens to you against a team that's 3 leagues below, yeah, and it's not like they particularly. We showed that we could have been able to beat them on the day. Like, we were good enough in the first half against them, but second half we just didn't look bothered. So, and I think quite a lot of town fans just weren't happy about that at all.
So that's both the sort of highlights, if you like, of the lowlights. In terms of signings and transfers, it's a bit unfair. We're going to speak about obviously this season and transfers and signings, which would be fair to say a bit more of his signings. But I've got a few names down here. Danny Williams, Charlie Cooper, Jack Redshaw, just a few names I've picked off. But it might not be as fair because it was one of those, like Jeff King, he said it on there, that it was one of those where he, came in, Nathan Clark said, yeah, come in and train and get yourself in. And then he signed later on. So to say, if you like, that they're Pete Wild signings and, because of the chaos around at the club, it's one of those, you might not say it's fully signing, if you like. It's just sort of a little disclaimer there. We're going to move on to this season's signings, which we could say more of his signings. But in terms of signings made, ones that I rapid really on in the season or a little bit later on, what were those like? Because obviously part of the manager is obviously the coaching side, the tactics, stuff like that, but also part of it is making good signings. And you could be a really good coach-wise, but if you're not really good at picking out new players, then you're going to start to struggle as old ones leave.
Yeah. You've kind of got it spot on with the situation at the club in terms of the pre-season signings. Jeff King obviously was one that got asked to come in by people other than Wild. A couple of the other ones were as well. I think Danny Williams was another one that was invited in by either Clark or Fullerton. I can't remember who it would have been at the time in terms of that particular one. So I think them signings, like Jeff King, Danny Williams, Jerome Bidden-Williams is another one that was on trial around the time that Pete Wild was brought in. They were signings that were, don't get me wrong, for Jeff King and Danny Williams, they've worked out, but they were signings that we sort of made because we had to really. We had a bare bones squad at the time, and that resulted in us being desperate to bring in players. So again, Danny Williams worked out as a signing. Jeff King's really worked out as a signing, but you look at other players that were brought in, like again, Bidden-Williams just wasn't a good signing at all. Charlie Cooper, I think, was. Now that I suppose you could argue was more of a Wild signing because that happened in the September, which to me at the time, again, I thought it at the time, I still think it now, it was the wrong signing at the wrong time. because at the time our captain Matty Brown, who's a centre back, got injured. So, and we almost all universally agree we need a centre back to come in to replace him temporarily. But for whatever reason, we bring in Cooper, who's a holding midfielder, and I just don't think he worked out for us at all. Like, he was the sort of player that just doesn't. I still don't know what he brings to his game. He's not creative. He isn't good defensively. He was just kind of bog standard, and he just wasn't what we needed. Jack Redshaw was another signing that was made under Wild. He was good, but he kind of fizzled out towards the end of the season. So but he was an all right player in the end, I guess. Who else would we have signed? Jamie Allen was one that was brought in by Fullerton. He's a good player. He gave Halifax options both up front and out wide, which it's kind of good to have that sort of Swiss Army knife of a player. And then Toby Shaw Silva, another one that came in before Wild. I think it shows that he wasn't really a Wild player because we just couldn't get the best out of him in either of Wild systems that year. In terms of other signing, Rodney. Again, he was. Now that's the example of a right signing at the right time. We needed someone to provide that vital spark up front that we were missing at the time, and Rodney provided it. And as I've alluded to before, that's probably what saved the season and got us into the playoffs, albeit via a curtailed season.
So we spoke about sort of incomings there for last season. Now we're going to speak about this season. So coming into the season, you start thinking about, okay, playoffs. You said yourself that I'd gone normally, don't think you would have got there, but you must have been thinking, okay, then we'll sort of have a good sort of season, even if it's not playoffs though. And it's one of those where Pete Wild is obviously a young manager, so you'd imagine the more he goes on, the better he'll get. It's not a case of like he's been in management for 10 years and he might not make a lot of progress. You'd expect him to make quite a lot of progress, obviously, learning from his mistakes. Coming into the season, then, what were sort of Halifax fans thinking, and what were you thinking for this season as a possibility?
So this season, the preseason again, it was sort of a mixed one. Like we kind of, it's one where we went into about halfway through the preseason, we were very pessimistic in a way. We were losing a lot of good players. Matty Brown, club legend, left through circumstances that weren't entirely related to playing. It was just kind of a bit of a disagreement regarding training arrangements. Duckworth was another big loss for us. He went to York. Redshaw, another one that went to York. So we'd lost kind of three big players there. And so we're just thinking, oh, here we go. We're going to find ourselves in a relegation battle this year. But then all of a sudden we start making some absolutely fantastic signings. Like Luke Summerfield, a brilliant player at this level and has been for years now, gets brought in. Jake Hyde, another player that's brilliant at this level, gets brought in. Martin Woods, who did a very good job in the SPL up in Scotland, gets brought in. Who else came in? Neil Byrne, a player who'd been all right for Fylde, ended up getting brought in. And it's just players of that sort of standard that kind of made us very optimistic for the season. So it's just things like that just all of a sudden completely changed the mood at the club.
I've got the three names I put down to start alluding to that, with Jake Hyde, Luke Summerfield, like you said, and also a little bit later on, Javavo Nepo as well, who Pete Wild obviously knew from Oldham. I know you've been sort of tweeting about him, sort of saying Ian a striker. Has your mind changed about that since then, or are you still insisting he ain't a striker?
It's a weird one because I think it was a game recently where he did an all right job up front, but again, he's still kind of being played out of position for us, which I think has led to a few Town fans criticising him unfairly, saying, "Oh, what does he bring?" And you just have to say to him, "Look, he's being played out of position. He's not really going to be able to bring the best of his game there." And funnily enough, the game that we played just before that we were this recording, Hartlepool in the FA Trophy, we did go for a 4-2-3-1, and we did stick Gerraro out on the left. And what do you know? He suddenly has the game of his life. So he's a very good player. We just need to use him in a way that's able to get the best out of him.
Yeah. Nepo is a good player. He's played League One, played League Two, been fabulous at those two levels. So you'd expect him to, probably tear up National League. So it might be just a case of, I know he's getting a bit on the older side, which might be sort of a downside for him, but you'd expect him, like I said, he gets a good run, gets used to it. And it was at Chesterfield last year. You can get a good run of him and he could be, a good player for you. Just a case of playing him in the right position, which you disagreed with him with. But, we'll see how it goes. And hopefully sort of becomes a good player for you. Just in this season in general then, currently 16th, won 4, drew 4, lost 5 in the league. So it's one of them, 3 of those wins come in the last 4 games. You had that little bit of a run. So obviously you'd be disappointed to be down near the bottom, but you're a bit more happy that the good points have come more recently because you say, that might be a bit more long-term thing and the start's just been a bit bad.
Well, I think part of it's down to the fact that we had an incredibly tough start to the season. We were just kind of talking before we came on the podcast, didn't we, that we've struggled against the sides above us in the league, rather. But if you look at who we've played that's below us, we're unbeaten against all of them. So I think, but yes, I'm not going to blame it entirely on the teams that we're playing at the start because there were times at the start of the season where we could have been playing better. We should have been playing better. We weren't really playing as well as we were capable of. But I guess other factors that went into that were the fact that Jake Hyde wasn't really fit. He kind of had a problem with a back injury coming into the season, and he just had to kind of deal with that before we got the best out of him. And since he's recovered, he's been probably one of the most informed strikers in the league. So I'm thinking now that we've gelled, we probably will start climbing our way up the table. I think we'll probably kind of finish just maybe outside the playoffs. I'd like to see a little bit more consistency in terms of showing what we're capable of before I start making shouts of, oh, we're going to reach the playoffs, or we're going to go up. But I think if we put together a good run based on how we've been playing in games like Barnet, games like Aldershot, games like Weymouth, where we've scored, combined total of 13 from those games, by the way. If we play like we've been playing in those games consistently, then we should be in for a good season. So I'll wait to see if we can carry that on before making a complete guess.
You mentioned that sort of stat I showed you before. I completely accidentally found that, by the way. I'll quickly run through it, and I'll put a little image up on the screen so you guys can see it, hopefully. So lost against Torquay, Sutton, beat Notts County, lost against Wealdstone, beat Woking.
We drew against Notts County.
Oh, sorry, drew against Notts County, sorry. You'll have the image up on screen as well so you can see it. Mm-hmm. Lost against Stockport and Solihull and drew against Bournemouth. And for the teams who were below you, you beat Aldershot, beat Dagenham, beat Barnet, drew against Yeovil and beat Weymouth. So a case of being unbeaten against teams below you, but not getting winners against ones above you. And obviously you've got to change. Obviously you want to get up there, but those wins, the form would suggest, like I said, the wins have been more recent. So you might sort of say, all right, then you had that bad start, obviously, but it's going to be a bit more permanent. And you just said, you have as a guess. say probably just outside the post, which I think you'd still take, sort of a building and letting him build his squad, and over the years or whatever. That's what this whole thing is about Pete Wild and how we think he's going to do. Just got a little sort of his league record for Halifax: 50 games, won 21, drew 11, lost 18. And so that's one of them. Again, obviously, combination over 2 seasons, 50 games now. So he's had quite a lot of experience. It's not like it's 10 games or anything like that. So he had a fair amount there. I sort of asked the question then, but so for the future for him, obviously still a young manager, what are the sort of scenarios you see that could happen? Not saying you think they are going to happen, it's going to be the one. What do you think are the more realistic scenarios, though?
I think under Pete Wild we'll always be a kind of club that are capable of challenging for the playoffs. I think, given the situation at the club, where it's not that we have bad ownership, it's just that financially we're not going to be able to compete with kind of your clubs like Notts Counties, your clubs like particularly Wrexham, obviously with their takeover. Your clubs like your other kind of big spending clubs in the league. So I think we'll probably still just kind of be a club that kind of knock on the door of the playoffs, maybe achieve it if things fall right for us. But if we were kind of looking at outside investment last season, but that didn't happen. So I do think Pete Wild will maybe be the manager who gets us into the Football League one day. It's just about when that happens. So I do think we're never going to struggle properly under Wild. I don't think it's just a case of when about to these kind of like good things happen under him in terms of like reaching and maybe winning the playoffs one day. So it's certainly a possibility, I think.
So I should sort of heard it then. You reckon he's the right man for the job, just might take a bit of time. And if there were outside investment or some other things going your way, that might accelerate it or make it more likely. But also, you don't think that you're going to sort of get relegated and struggle massively under him. It's going to be sort of, at the very least, it's going to be sort of safe, and there's always going to be something to build on.
Yeah, exactly. Again, it's just about how long it's going to take in terms of before we properly progress as a club. Like, it will happen under Wild. It's just a case of whether circumstances out of his control allow that to happen sooner or not.
There we go. That's the end of this now. Hope you have enjoyed this bit of a different sort of special we've done. Hope to do a few more of these with sort of different clubs and different sort of scenarios with perhaps a manager or perhaps even just talking about one particular player if you've got a really, really good player. Hopefully to do a few more of these, just provide some content, like I said, for National League fans. That's what we're looking to do. Before we leave, we've got 2 things. First of all, like Lewis said beforehand, we did do a podcast with Jeff King. This was the first one we did in this series, where we went and had a chat with him about his career at FC United, Bolton and Halifax, and this was at the start of the season, I think, now. So if you're a Halifax fan, go and watch that if you haven't seen it already. And even if you're not a Halifax fan, I still think they're a good series. So the link to that whole series will be in the description if you can have a listen. And for you, Lewis, if somebody wants to go and find out what you're talking about, what your thoughts are on Halifax and other things, where should they find you?
They should find me on my Twitter, which you can find me at Lewis R. Walsh, no spaces. I'm also going to put it out there that I'm a journalist for hire. So if you ever want me to write for your website or appear on any sort of podcasts, just drop me a DM and we'll get it sorted.
Yeah, so I'll leave that in the description as well. So you can go and have a follow and have a look at some of his stuff and slagging off Nepo playing at striker. Thanks for coming on, mate. And like I said before, if you've got any more suggestions, anyone watching this for other types of specials, if you like, this series, we're going to call it specials, to talk about these types of things, leave it in the comments below. Thanks for watching.